as I mentioned, we are here to learn more with John McGowan. We are recording this. And then, John, maybe once you get that all shared, if you could pop to slide 3 for us, we'll kick things off with our land acknowledgement. We know that we're joining from all over Canada. I know we have Texas here. I know John is over in Hawaii, but regardless of where we are, there were settlers here before us. And so I'm based out of Calgary. I am on Treaty 7 territory, and we've got the Blackfoot, the Siksika, the Piikani, the Kainai, Tsuut'ina, and the Stoney Nation, as well as the Métis. So just such rich heritage here in this land that I am fortunate enough to live on. But you'll see that link there, native-land.ca. Even if you are in Texas or Hawaii or wherever you are, take a peek at that map. It's beautiful, and might hopefully give you information on who settled here before you. And with that, John, next slide, please. Maybe. There we go.
There we go. Yeah.
So I'm Michelle Armstrong. Like I said, I'm based out in Calgary. I am with Cobblestone Collective. And if you're not too familiar with us, I'm guessing you probably are. But what you know is that we rely on consultants, current educators, coaches, and we've got a couple people here with us who are doing other things beyond Cobblestone, but thankfully coming to hang out with us and teach us cool, great things and guide us. And so our main guide for today is going to be Isabella Liu. I'm going to be kind of back in the background answering questions in the chat, but Isabella, why don't you take it away?
Hi, everybody. I am Isabella Liu. I am tuning in from Toronto, covered by the Treaty 13. I am very excited to be joining here. I actually signed up as a participant. So when they asked me to support this session, I'm just like, yeah, why not? Like, I get to see the ins and outs of everything. So I'm excited to be learning alongside with you all. And I think this is going to be right up your alley, because this is such a good tool for you to add on to your teacher toolbox. So, and I'm going to pass it on to John.
Hey, y'all. So my name is John McGowan. I have lived so many places around the world. It's hard to say, where I'm from. Currently, I'm in Hawaii, but my residence permit is in Ireland. My driver's license is from Ontario. My daughter was born in Singapore, and she'll be 8 in the fall, and this will be only the second time she's spent the same, repeated a birthday in a country. So lived lots of different places. And so, yes, I really appreciate especially the GTA in Ontario and all my Canadian friends. Some of my favorite ed tech team times and presentations I've done were in Canada. So that's why my driver's license from the GTA, because we almost moved there. So also, you might not know, you might know me not from Automagical Forms. I have done a variety. I taught for a lot of different places, a lot of different countries. But before I was doing Automagical Apps, I worked for TextHelp because I had a Google add-on that I sold to them and turned it into a Chrome extension called Equatio. So that is where I know a lot of y'all from as well. So good to see you. And it's great, friendly faces. So I appreciate it. Thank you all.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, John. And actually, you can just take it away and show us your magic.
Awesome. Thanks. I do really appreciate the Cobblestone Collective. So as for the Cobblestone Collective are amazing. So if you're not aware with them, you should be. And I'm sure most of y'all are as well, but really super thankful. They are always my favorite people. So if I haven't met you yet, I'm sure I will love working with you. So the whole big thing here, and I do have to apologize in advance for a few things. One, I do have a monotonous voice, but sometimes I get really excited and I talk really, really fast. And so I'm aware of that. And even though I am aware of it, I still can't help it. It's one of those things, like a throttle goes away. And I love to geek out. And so sometimes I might geek out, but I really do try to stick to what I say I'm going to do. From years of teaching, I like to give, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to talk about. And then hopefully I follow through and follow my own thing. But sometimes I don't, and that's okay. But I'll try to keep, that's why Isabella is here to help keep me on track along with Michelle. And so that's really what I'm going to talk about is Google Forms. I love Google Forms, and I know that a lot of you all are really familiar with it, especially, unfortunately, from the past year and a half. You probably taught for a year and a half using virtually or hybrid or whatever your situation was. You really needed to use technology a lot more. And I have been feeling for years and years and years that technology doesn't work enough for us. And so that's really what I do, is try to make technology work for me. And so we're going to talk a little bit about Google Forms and then why Google Forms and assessment, but then also like how do I work smarter instead of harder or longer? And Automagical Forms kind of was born out of that. How do I work smarter? And to help create and funnel information into Google Forms. And then near the end, depending on how long I talk and how many different tangents I get on, I'll try to show off a little bit of my geeky stuff, but things that I have in the works. I really was hoping I would have the latest update done today, but I didn't. So there are a lot of things like super close, like 95% done for Automagical Forms. And then also, I know Michelle has teased off a little bit of a branching form for a Choose Your Own Adventure it's not ready for prime time. I feel like I'm disappointing for her, but that should be really close as well to do some really fun stuff. So I've been playing a lot with that. And lastly, I'll show you about what I feel like is the newest, shiniest thing that will be, I think, a really will leverage your superpowers as a teacher is Google Chat. And so you might not have been using chat yet. And I know there's a variety of different, depending on what your school board does with what they enable and what they don't. And it wasn't into Gmail, but it's coming everywhere. And I think it's going to be one of those things that you're going to be really happy that you learn how to use and leverage out. So that is, for me, is like 2021-22 school year is going to be all about learning how to use Google Chat to make yourself like work a lot smarter. So that's what I was kind of highlighting at the end there. Yeah, so let's get into it. And so first off, I think for assessment, like a lot of us, I was a math teacher for about 15 years. I taught everything from like I was getting my PhD in math and was teaching graduate students to 6th grade math, which was like just like struggling students working with adding fractions with common denominators. And so I've had a variety of things that I've taught, and a lot of times like assessment was always the biggest thing. I love data. I taught statistics for a while, but I think for assessment for me is always really a lightning rod, especially like how do I assess a grade? How am I assessing you? How are you as a student learning? What are we showing indications of learning, and how do we do that? So I think that was the biggest thing that through my spectrum as a teacher, I initially defaulted to whatever my teachers did. And as a teacher, I loved the game of school. I did well at the game of school. If you ask me now, like what would be my best profession, it would be like anything that involves repeatedly taking tests. Like that is one of my skills. I'm a good test taker. And so I think that's why I just kept staying in school for so long. But I realize now that I have so many students who aren't great test takers, or they don't enjoy it, or that's not something that really demonstrates how they show off what they know. And so I think that's been the journey that I've been on the past like 7 years probably, is like how to empower students to show what they know. Which that I took a few years on Equatio and like bringing different ways that you could show maths learning on a computer. And then also now with my daughter, really just talking about like, what is education? How can she show what she can learn? How can we prepare for the future, especially with the advent of AI and computers being so prevalent? What does that all look like? And so I think assessment plays a part in that. And traditional formative assessment is great for me as a teacher and sometimes good for the students. And then those summative assessments where I have to assign a grade to like do grading is also a thing. So I am aware that it's a lightning rod, but also I feel like it should be painless. And really it is very painful. I feel like it was always the thing that I haven't been in the classroom now since the end of the 2015, 2016 school year. And so many people ask me, even the past year, like, will I go back to teaching, or what do I miss most about teaching? And what I will say is I do not miss assessment, and I do not miss like reporting. And so I feel like were the administrative things. The things I do miss is connecting with students, creating creative assignments and lessons, and like figuring out how students can show what they know and like bring around that story. And so I feel like assessment falls under one of those pieces of like almost administrative work that I have to do in my job, but I don't enjoy doing it. So I want to try to make it not be a big part for you all. And so that's my goal, is to make it like painless and easy to do. So a lot of times I still feel like I said, I've been in the classroom for a few years, but I know that even the last year I was in a classroom, I would always still have a stack of paper that I would always have to take out. So paper-based assessments were really difficult. And even after that, it then becomes just a digital PDF of like, how are we going to assess this? And so I feel like Google Forms is a really great way to do that. And also a variety of other ways, like, so even Canvas LMSs, or if you're in Schoology or D2L or whatever your LMS is, or whatever you might be mandated to do a certain type of assessment. And so I think I'm also aware of that. So I would think that for me, Google Forms is really great because I don't do assessment to give it out and score it or grade it. What I want to do is get that feedback of did my students understand what I thought they understood? And I love the data on the back end of Google Forms. So anything that will make that easy for me to parse out. It makes it identifiable for me. I want to get it into that medium. And so paper-based assessment, I have to do all of the grading. I have to then gather all of the assessment. And then really I'm just focused on getting those back to students as fast as possible because they don't care later on. Whereas like the digital component makes that instant and makes it easier for me to get the responses back to the students, because if I could do it instantly, that's better because they care. The longer it takes for me to get that responses back to them, the less and less they care. So if I can do it instantly, that's what they really want to do. And so Google Forms is great because I can give them instant responses. I can also use the power of technology to amplify me, whether I'm using an email mail merge or whether I'm doing an assessment on, is there certain questions that my students miss the most, or are there things that I thought that they did that they didn't? I can look at that from question to question, and then I can also like export it out with a bunch of add-ons. So that's why I love Google Forms to get in there, to make it so I can parse out that data more effectively and then inform my teaching or inform how I want to report about the student in those different ways. And so I think that is some of the big things about Google Forms. I do see that the autosave feature just came up. That for me is a huge component. I love the new autosave feature of Google Forms. One of the things I've been playing around with a lot is that with Google Forms, with the autosave, sometimes if I want to do repeated things, it can be difficult because it still saves my responses from the first one as I autosave. So sometimes when I was teaching, I like to give students multiple forms. And so we're going to focus on Automagical Forms at first, but that's new as of the past year and a half. Form Creator is what I really originally did. In Form Recycler, I built them so I could recycle quiz questions and make more and more quizzes for my students. So great, you got 8 out of 10 on that one. You want to do it again? Let's talk about what you missed, and I'll make another quiz up for you. And so that's why I built a lot of those tools. And so those are those Google Form benefits as to they can respond digitally with other devices. I still think there's a huge gap to go so we can really maximize these devices, and especially to bring that equity down. Like the smartphones are really almost ubiquitous now, but Chromebooks, even though they're the lower price, not everyone still has a Chromebook. And so laptops aren't still prevalent to everybody. Boards are close to 1-to-1 now, I think, most of the time. Even in the US, a lot of districts have, every student has a device, but almost all of them have access to a phone. And I think we need to make it easier to respond to Google Forms and other assessments with other devices. And other ways too, like audio responses and drawing and all those different multiple ways to do that. It's still that gap of where things could be going.
Hey, John, we've just like, okay, we may have just derailed like the entire conversation because some people are realizing, what? Google Forms has autosave?
Sorry about that.
We're actually, those of you, if you haven't seen the new autosave feature in Google Forms, it could be just that your board level, it hasn't reached there yet. So it's on a sort of staggered release. But yeah, stay tuned for Automagical Forms, which is not Google Forms. It takes Google Forms to another level. And I think we've recognized John as definitely that data geek. And in the chat, I also want to know, who else are our data geeks out here and are excited about data and Automagical Forms? So yeah, John, keep going.
Awesome, thanks. So yeah, so this thing talks a little bit about Automagical Forms and what is it and how is it different from Google Forms. Essentially, Automagical Forms is a way to take and transfer information from existing mediums that you have to other formats. And the best thing that it does right now is to take questions out of Google integrations and put them into Google Forms. So the short part about it is I used a bunch of AI to train it to recognize questions. So if I feed it a document, it tries to figure out what questions are. And then it takes those and lets you do things with them. The main thing is it makes Google Forms, but also it makes an LTI integration, which works in Canvas. And it's very close to working in D2L Brightspace, but there's some little nuances where it doesn't go. But essentially, it should just figure out, hey, are these the questions in your document? And if so, what do you want to do with them? So that's kind of the overall thing it can do. It identifies questions. And so currently, the best way that it works, it's a Google Workspace add-on. And those are also new add-ons as well. So I had built a lot of add-ons, like that's where some of you know me from. I made Gmath, which was a Google add-on to make math. And those first worked only in Google Docs. And then add-ons kept adding on other integrations, for instance, Google Forms, and then later on Google Slides. So there's where those are called legacy add-ons according to Google, or Google add-ons, and they're available in the add-ons menu. I'll hop over in a second just to show you what these workspace add-ons look like. And Google, you know how they've shifted they used to be Google for Education and then G Suite, and now they're Google Workspace. And so just as Google is changing what they're calling their branding of their suite of tools, they've also kind of amended what they are calling their add-ons. And add-ons are essentially things that Google doesn't make, but they have third-party developers or other companies make that let you work on top of the Google suite. So I make add-ons on top of that. And so these new workspace add-ons, why do I love them so much and why are they different? Is it's like one add-on that works multiple places. So it's a single add-on that you only need to install one time, or tell your IT people to try to install one time, and then it works all the different integrations. So Automagical Forms works in Gmail, Google Drive, Docs, and Slides. Surprisingly enough, maybe not, that Google Forms is excluded of those. There is no Google Forms workspace add-ons. And I don't have a Slides integration for Automagical Forms right now. So that is the nice part about Google Workspace add-ons, and I'll pop over to another tab to show you where you can find those. And I know that some school districts and some school boards do not have Workspace add-ons installed yet. They're new as of like late January 2020. And so as they were coming out, all of us hit some other hiccups in technology, you know, when you were instantly like changing to digital things. So that's kind of why that changed over. And so now hopefully your IT or school boards will be more open to doing that. But one of the things that I'll show you over here is this little sidebar thing. I think you can see, yeah. So this little sidebar thing is where these new workspace add-ons hang out. And this little sidebar will be rolled out across all of Google Workspace board wide even. I don't know what the release is if you see that on for yours, but one of the things is it might be hidden. Down here in the bottom, there's this little arrow. And so it might be hidden. You might only see this little arrow tab. And so for me, this is like really super powerful. You can pop it out and show this side panel. And this is where you can add these Google Workspace add-ons. And so if I click these get add-ons, that will go to the same place where I normally did in other places. So I'm going to hop over to this Google Doc and just show you that in Google Docs, you're probably used to seeing these add-on menu up here, and that's where you find all your add-ons and then pull them out from. But these will now be rolled out in Gmail, Google Drive, Docs, Slides, and Sheets. You'll see this little sidebar over here. And then the other beautiful part that I love about it is it always has the Google Calendar, Keep, and Tasks here as well. And so those are super powerful. If you're not even using any workspace add-ons, you can utilize all these just kind of in the sidebar and see like, what do I have to do? Here's some of my Keep files, and then I can add tasks. And so that's a really great thing for me to stay organized as well, especially when I open this up in my Gmail. I can add things to my tasks, which add it to my calendar. So I can be in my email and be like, oh, I have to do that thing. Let me put it in my calendar really quickly without having to shift over to my calendar tab. And once I shift tabs, I get off task in a sense. I'll be like, oh, I have that meeting coming up with some collective. I better get started on that. And I go over my Google Docs and I forget to come back to my email and forget to put those things in there. So I think this will be really helpful, especially if I think about it for students in keeping things organized. Keep is really great. To have Keep there in every integration is a really nice thing as well. So the workspace add-ons, I can click on these to get these add-ons. And when I click on that, that's how I can install them. And I would suggest that everybody should be able to do that if you can. And this is now like your board Google admin might say you can't install them, or they might have curated a list and say you can install these ones, or maybe you can't install anything and they just push things out to you. So that's how add-ons work, and these new workspace add-ons are the same. But now you'll see these things folded in. So some of these are legacy add-ons like Math Type, which is accessible from the add-ons menu. And other ones are workspace add-ons where they'll be over here in the sidebar. And after you install them, it'll tell you where you can find them from. And so Automagical Forms will always be over here on this sidebar. So that's one thing I'll say. And I forgot to put in the slide there, but I'll put it in at the end. Mergo is another slide, and they have a thing now where they're giving. So Mergo, if you've ever used an email mail merge called Yet Another Mail Merge, the guy who made that, Romain Villard, made Mergo. And he is giving away free licenses for the year for all school boards. And you just have to fit, it's a promotion until the end of September. So I'll put a link to that where every school board can install and get free license to that for the year. And so I think that's a big thing to do, is that Mergo. And so the cool thing about Mergo is it's just like Yet Another Mail Merge. I can do mail merging campaigns. I use it from the form response spreadsheet. and I have like an email template I make in my Gmail that I want to send to my students sometimes to remind them some things. And I love the email tracking, so I can see if they've opened it up or if they have opened it but haven't clicked the link I have. So some of those things are really great for my workflow for Mergo. So I would definitely highlight that.
And John, I'm going to jump in too, because
please.
I know we sometimes run into the issue that, well, my board doesn't allow these add-ons. Or, I mean, I love this new news that Mergo is free for any board, which is awesome. Thank you, Romaine. But it is a reality that maybe the board isn't going to allow that. And so I guess we just have to make sure to set the expectations that, like, it's there. We can use these in our personal Gmail accounts or our personal Google accounts, and hopefully we can get our boards to approve them as well. But it's definitely a reality that we just want to make sure that we're aware of. So, oh, see, Erica, see, wah, wah. But Anna Maria's board has it. So, but yes, it's the truth.
It is. And I would say I even spend probably 4 hours a week. So like 10% of my, well, not, I work more than 40 hours, but like liaising with school boards and school districts around the US, or talking about data privacy and student security. So that's a huge thing. Like I don't want to gloss over that. So I know that for the hard part about Google add-ons is Google puts kind of the onus on the developer, even though they vet it. Like Google, before I can publish something, I have to go through a big, long process of even the things that I'm allowed to do. And so, for instance, in Google Drive, I can no longer kind of run anything that I want to without having to go through a security assessment by Google to show that I'm not like stealing all of your Google Drive information. But that is a reality. And so if you're bored, if you need to get your board to do something, I'm happy to jump on a phone call to tell them I don't store any privacy. I don't store any personal identifiable information. Like, I'm really happy to have gone through a lot of work to make sure that doesn't happen. So I'm pretty confident that I can convince your board that it's safe if they're willing to talk to me. But I understand that that's a thing. And sometimes it's just hard to get them to do things because they have a lot of stuff on their plate. The good part is, so part of that, I have some boards who won't, or school districts who won't install it. And so you can do it in your Gmail. And then what I tell people is just use Automagical Forms in your Gmail, create the form, and then it's in your Gmail Google Forms. And then what you can do is you can add your school board as a collaborator and then actually make a copy. And so the reason I say to make a copy as well is so that way your school board Gmail will own that, your school board email will own it, and then it's much easier to use in, well, then I feel better because then your school board is under that data policy and not, my responses aren't hanging out my Gmail as well. But so also then I can easily share it to Classroom, and I can, then my board or my school Gmail kind of owns that form and it's easy to transfer over. So it's much easier for that, like, where does that data lie?
We have a fantastic question from Sean, and I actually have the same question as well, because I'm also blocked, and they're wondering if there's any pre-prepared PIA documents that we can just use to just let our schools or departments know so that they can like relax. We're just trying to help our workflow a little bit, not trying to steal data here.
Yeah. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know. I know on my website, I have a link that says like where I'm, GDPR compliant, HIPAA compliant, COPPA, FERPA, all those things, and I don't collect any PII. The other thing I do is I have a link in the US, they have a couple of different states that have these data privacy laws. So I've worked like huge, some school, so Texas and California are big states where they have these own state mandated privacy laws. And so I've had to go through there, and there's a national website of companies and vendors who have done that. And so I can show a link, which I know in Canada, it's not, I don't mean to say like, oh, it's good for the US, it's good for you, but I just know that along those same kind of overarching rules, it's easy to show like, it works for New York has a state law, so it works in New York, it works in California, it works in Texas. So it's generally those same things. We don't collect information. So I can give a link, and I think we have I can send, I think we're probably going to send an email for the recording so we can attach that information to the communication that we send back out to anybody who signed up. So I can get that. That's a great question. Thanks, Isabella. And thanks, Sean. Let's see. Okay, so let's get back to Automagical Forms. So I think the first thing I want to talk, that's why these Google Workspace add-ons, I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about those because those are new-ish. They are new and they keep rolling out slowly. Like the Google Sheets ones are just kind of in the past few months fully rolled out, and as of the beginning of the summer. And then Google Slides is still a little bit wonky. So sometimes it works, sometimes you have to refresh it a couple of times. And so I know it's a big thing, but I'm really excited about where those are going. So that's something that's really helpful. Let's let's see. Okay, so I have a lot of different information. So even so much privacy, I don't want to show you on my Google Drive, or I don't want to show you all my Gmail emails. And so those types of things, that's why I like search. And like one of the big things up here is like how you can search and use that Q equals and then do some searching there. So I don't show you all the things. I won't geek out anymore, but I also have a Chrome extension that I built where it does blurs different parts. And so it's fun. I can just drag a rectangle and it'll blur out certain pieces of information. And that'll be something for not include on this, but that's like a tech piece that I love is I just want to blur out this part. And so let's blur it. And so it's a good Chrome
I'm
extension.
assuming that you can increase and decrease the size of the rectangles. You're blowing my mind right now, John.
Totally, yeah. I haven't installed it on this because I just got a new device essentially for this thing. I'm on a Mac now. I have a Mac Mini where I was using Chrome Pixel. So it's on my Pixel Slate because it was a local developer one. I haven't published it out, but I'm working on publishing that. So yeah, you can do it, and you can even click on certain things. So I can click on certain emails or click on certain areas, and when those resize, it still knows that element. So it just like blocks out that part. And I remember when I don't know, 2006 or 7, I had a smartboard in my classroom. I loved the smart notebook software. I had the little window shade and I could drag it down and just show part of it. And I was like, oh, I love that. I just need to show parts of it versus like in Google Slides, I have like a rectangle blotted out that I like drag on the slide and then move it over to show the answer. So you can do kind of the same things in Chrome. And so that's a fun thing, but that is not something I've published yet, but that's again, things that I geek out about, like, oh, I should be able to do that and use that. So I'm excited to do things. So once I do some of this, if you haven't learned about like searching, you should definitely search in your drive and figuring out how to search on specific things, especially using like owner is really good for Google search. And there's, I could talk for hours on how to optimize where to find my things, especially resources online. But the way Automagical Forms works is in Google Drive, it can work on PDFs, images, and sometimes Microsoft Word docs. So you'll see I have a bunch of different unicorns over here. So one of them is the one that's published live that you all have. And the other one, like this one, is the one that I've been working on for about 8 months that I was hoping to have up. And it definitely works on Microsoft Word documents. But the one you have sometimes works on Microsoft Word documents. So those are the types of files it works on. And it can also works on Google Docs and Google Slides, but you can use those in the Google Drive part, or you can go into Google Slides or Google Docs and use it there. So here, all I do is I have this PDF that I want to work on, and I open up this sidebar. And if I haven't clicked on a file, this sidebar will show something new, but I can't show that live in a demo because it shows my whole Google Drive. So if you open up Google Drive and have it installed and you don't click on a file, it'll just tell you a little bit about Automagical Forms over here. And I will share a link. I have a YouTube tutorial of some common things. One of the things is when you open up Google Drive at the top, there's these things called quick access. Those are not actually files. Those are like snapshots of a file that's down below. So if you try to click on the quick access, nothing will happen. And so I'd say like probably a third of my support emails come in where people are like, I clicked on it, nothing happened. And they're just clicking on the quick access files. You have to scroll down to find the actual file, not the quick access. And then there's two options here. One is Automagically, and the other is draw on file. So Automagically is where everything is pre-baked in. It has all the AI in there. So what it does is the AI goes through and says like, hey, there's this PDF, go through and find a bunch of the questions. So when I did, it clicked that button, it read through this PDF, and I'll just show you this PDF. It is just a multiple choice, regular numbered multiple choice thing. And it is a normal PDF that was scanned in there. So if I wanted to turn that into a Google form, I don't want to have to drag and or type or copy and paste. I just want it to like know that's multiple choice and then fill it in. And so there's so on the side, it'll say right up here on the top, it's like, hey, this is what we found. I found 28 questions. You want to make a form out of all of them? And you can just click create form, which I'll do in a second. And that'll just make a form with those 28 questions that I found. Sometimes the AI it's like a student who is just learning. And so it's constantly growing and learning more. Sometimes it gets confused about what a question is. And the hardest part for me is it gets really confused with like decimal points. And so it thinks sometimes it's a period at the end of the sentence, sometimes it's a decimal point, and they confuse the two. So it does not do well with math questions that include a decimal point, because sometimes it thinks it's the end of a sentence and gets confused, and especially with choices. So we'll talk about what it doesn't do well in later on. But so I can say like, oh, it did not do good with like maybe this question here. And so you could uncheck it, and then you could create a custom form, which would be, it would just do the ones that you've checked. So the top one is do all of them, or you could just check select ones if it didn't do a good job of finding questions. And then at the bottom, so I can create a custom form that only does the check ones, or create a custom Canvas QTI. So the Canvas QTI is it does a bunch of stuff and makes it so you could upload a quiz to Canvas. So it essentially gives you a folder that's a zip file that you could upload to Canvas if you use that. So that also should work for D2L Brightspace, but it doesn't because there's some nuances that need to be fixed, but it's very close to working there. So that from this, it says, these are these questions, and I click create the form. And then now we go through and it will run and create the form. There's one other thing that can be super frustrating for developers especially, but Google Workspace add-ons are only allowed to run for 30 seconds. And then which other add-ons are allowed to run for up to 30 minutes, depending on the type of board thing you have. And so sometimes if it takes too long to do it, it will say, I think this one, it should come in and tell me that, but it should tell me 28 is about good where it should find it. So it builds it and tells me there's a form. If there's like 50 questions, it would pop up a little window and say, I can only run for 30 seconds. And then it needs to interact again. And there's a button that says click and finish up those questions. So that's one difference with Workspace add-ons. And so when I open that form up, it'll go through and it does a couple things. There's an option to so this is kind of like what it sees on the back end, which is not a good thing. It's an option to put those pages in there as a question. So that's the weird part about like getting a glimpse into what it sees. I can turn that option off in my thing, but then it also says, these are the questions that it got. And so you might notice here at the end of the question, there's those dash things. That comes from, it was the part here where if I had a piece of paper, I'd write what that answer was. So it thought that was part of the question. So there are some nuances. That's why I'm glad the AI is not going to take anyone's job yet, because it's still like, this is after working for a year and a half trying to teach it what is a question, and it still thinks that's part of the question. So it's not smart. It just can do like it learns how to do one thing. But it goes through pretty well and finds those multiple choice questions. Sometimes you might need to do some other editing here, but for the most part, you don't have to. And it's created right in your Google Drive. So this thing, even if it does get stopped, if I don't click the open form, I can also just go to my forms or in my Google Drive, and you'll see right away it creates that Google form. So sometimes it gets stuck. One of the things it gets stuck the most on is if Google Forms currently doesn't let you do through the app multiple choice values that are exactly the same. And so if you try to have like two of them that are exactly the same, it'll throw an error. But my new version, we don't have to worry about that. So it's kind of like that happens now for like a week. But if you had like, say, USA, it would sometimes think like that the two of them are the same. So yeah. So then it's just a normal way to get into Google Forms. And then I can have my students take that. I can share it however I want to do my Google Forms. I can add it to Classroom. I can send it by email. But essentially, it's a nice way to take that PDF file that I had here, and instead of me printing it up or sharing it or having them, whatever students are going to do to them as a PDF, I could have put this in Classroom as an attachment. Maybe they would write on top of it. Or if I try to open that up in Google Docs, formatting can go all haywire. So it's really, I think, the easiest way to take the content of that and put it into a format that's easiest for me to identify into Google Forms.
I have a question, John. So I noticed that your PDF, it's formatted a certain way.
Yeah, yes.
Do you find that the AI reads questions a certain way, like, or it's smart enough to like figure out, oh, this is a multiple choice question. This is probably
yes. So it's not smart enough to do very well. I'm trying to find, yeah. So it doesn't show those so these are things that it can't do really well. Math and science questions, it gets confused by easily. And it identifies the best questions that are numbered in the front and that have multiple choice answers. Now, sometimes that numbering can differ. So especially here, it also knows other languages without having to be trained other languages. So it looks at it and identifies things. So the way that you number it, so here I had it numbered, I think a number and then a dot and then a space. And so it also knows, well, if there's like an open parentheses after the number, or sometimes if it's a number, a parentheses, and then a dot. But maybe if you had a circle around that number, it gets confused. And so it also is like the notation there, it has to like learn. And so if you found that it doesn't identify them, you can tell me and I can try to teach it how to do that. So I know that other cultures have different ways they do it. For instance, I have a person in St. Martin so she does it using some Dutch notation, and they do things differently. And so it has to learn those things. And so if you send me some files of like, hey, this should be this, and I can say like, okay, what's the question you want? We can help teach it how to identify those questions. So for instance, I have about, I don't know how many, like tens of thousands of questions per day from people in Indonesia who were identifying these. And I didn't even know that it understood Bahasa Indonesia, like the Indonesian language, until I had all these people who were making forms. And so it kind of just understands that notation. So it works best if there's a number and then a dot. But if you even have just a number and a space, it works okay. And the current version struggles to identify questions if they don't have a number. So if you have a number in the front, it can do really well, even if there's no like question mark at the end to identify what a question is. So that's kind of the hardest part, is to teach it what is the question. So I have a lot of, I have learned a lot, not that I didn't really appreciate teachers who teach younger students, who like help them understand what's the concept of like lining up, or like, you know, doing those basic things. Even more so, like I always taught math, so I never had to teach anybody to read. And so I'm like trying to understand like how to teach the AI, like this is a question. What does a question look like? And understand all those contents. Like for me, that is really a fun part for me, is to see like this one student learn more and more. Like, no, this is how you identify that as a question, or what does it look like? And so, so that's the hard part. So some notation works best. I should have rolled up an example. It even knows handwritten notation. So literally some of my things, when I was in Singapore, I used to ride the bus, and I would handwrite my warm-up questions on the bus. And so I had all handwritten stuff. And so I wanted to make handwritten things. So you can even like take an image. So you can handwrite something on a piece of paper, snap a picture, and that picture's in your Google Drive, and you can use that picture to create your Google form. My handwriting, if you haven't seen me write, but my handwriting is atrocious, and it even does really well. So I figure if it can read my horrible handwriting, it can do pretty well. So that's another thing you can do, is have handwriting stuff, or from images or pictures, or literally just snap a picture from my phone of a written document that I have. And so then you can roll it in however to get it from that file type into a Google form. So I just had I see that someone wants a demo. We'll see if I can pull up I have a lot of pictures on there, so I don't want to randomly do that. Maybe I'll look on my other screen and see if I can find something to queue up for that.
Does it matter what format the image is in, or PDF is like,
yeah, so
PNG, JPEG? Yeah,
it can be PNG or JPEG. The only thing that it can't do is it can't be too big. So that's the frustrating part, is if it's too big, then it takes it too long to look at it. And so there's a couple different things that I can do. So I only have that 30 seconds of time to, so what I found is like when I would take a picture and email it as an attachment, because the Gmail version looks at attachments. And so I could take a picture of something and email it as an attachment, and my phone would create the picture that's like 6 gigabyte pictures sometimes, like super, super nice pictures. Gigabyte sounds too big, maybe megabyte. I think it's 6 megabyte. And it just takes it too long to figure out that picture. So pictures are tough when they get to be too big. So then you might have to, like, sometimes I have to run it through an image compressor to make it so it's not so big. And then I can post it. So the format doesn't matter, it just matters the size actually. And so quality, you can have a really low quality. Like I have a psychology professor from a university who has a bunch of mimeographed papers that are fading from like the 70s. And they were on a typewriter, and they're fading, and that still works, and even hand wrote some stuff in there. So like the quality doesn't have to be super great, it just can't be a super big file.
So I was just wondering if you could just review how we can create our form from the PDF that you have while you're searching for your image.
Yeah.
In the meantime.
No problem. So one of the other things too is it kind of remembers here as well. So if it didn't like it, so I have to, there's a couple ways I can get it to refresh my Google Workspace. This little 3 dots thing has the refresh, which will help it refresh that so it won't go through some things. And then if I hit this back arrow enough, there's some options. So one of the things is I can insert the images, so that toggle off. Now it won't try to put the image of them at the beginning. And then also I can say, like, if it was scanned, that is a little option that helps it out a little more, like to think that the PDF is really more like a picture. So sometimes if it didn't find it, if you toggle this over, it'll help it find it. The newer versions, it does a little bit better, but currently you might need to come to the options and toggle that on to help it out a little bit. And if I click on this refresh, it'll refresh it. And so now as I started, so I have this selected. So when I do the Automagically is when it's going to essentially on the back end go through and take that file and try to find the questions. And so let's see. So I'm going to be on my other screen trying to find a picture for you as it's thinking.
So all it is, we're just reviewing right now. So if you do have a PDF document on your drive, just click on the PDF document. If you already have Automagical Forms installed, that add-on installed, then you just have to click on Automagically, let it think, let it find out the questions, and then it will automatically populate like what you're seeing right now on John's screen.
Yeah, so this is where you could see, I think I have something queued up on my other one that I'll drag in, but it'll see this is what it thinks it found. So it thinks this is a question, it thinks this is a question. So like this part, it thought this was a question, and you can see that was the first thing. It was really just this kind of header. And so for that part, I don't necessarily want to, I'm like, no, that's not a question. Don't make that a question. And then I can scroll down to here, create custom form, and it'll create everything that was checked as a form.
Every time you click on that button, though, does it recreate a new form, or does it update the old form?
It currently makes a new form.
Okay.
And I don't mind showing my forms. There's probably just a bunch of test forms in there. But you can see it started building this form right here, and you can actually have it open in another tab and see where it is. And that also is fine, like as it gets stuck. Oh, no, it was finished by the time I came back over. But you can see it building the Google form in your forms. So like on this one, I opened it up before it was done with number 27. So if I refresh that, it'll have, I guess that was what it found there. Number 27 is the end. But you can find it in your Google Forms anyway. So it's kind of just a shortcut for your Google Forms to help it out some.
Oh, we do have a question from Jen about merging two.
Sure.
Is it two questions? Yeah, merging two questions. Do you need to manually cut and paste it, or is there a way around
Currently,
that?
you need to manually cut and paste, unfortunately. So that is, yeah, currently you have to do that to manually cut and paste. There are some new ways that are coming, you'll be able to do that, but currently not right now. Let's see. Okay, this is an image. There we go. So it's just an image of, I think I screenshotted something. So you could see here that there's just like 3 questions that were screenshotted, and they work the same from an image. It's just a PNG file. And so here I found this in my Google Drive. I just filtered this here, like to search it. You could just find it within your whole list of your Google Drive files. And then when you click on it and then click on Automagical Forms, it'll take that. And there are 2 options. If I click Automagically, it will go through and try to find the questions that it thinks. And it found these 3 questions. And then this is what it found. And so you could say like, yes, build those 3 questions and create the form. In terms of like adding 2 other forms, it's working on doing that, on making that better. So the next version, it allows you to add questions to an existing form, or sometimes it doesn't find them well and needs to have some more help. So let's see.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. We do have a question from the chat about accessing the options where you toggled, various options there.
Yeah, so this left arrow, this back arrow, lets you back through to the options menu, which is kind of whenever you open it up, it'll be there. You can either open it when it's not selected and that's your default, or if you have a question selected, you hit the left arrow. So if I didn't have a file already selected, it would show me this menu, and then I can click on these options and I can set them there. Let's see. I do want to show another. So I've clicked on that Automagically part a few times. And so sometimes the AI is not super great. And it also really gets struggled when, so to think about what the struggles are, like if you ever try to have a PDF and try to open up in Google Docs and the formatting is all wonky, that is kind of like a little bit of what it sees. And you could be like, well, that's all messed up. Like it's not going to be able to get anything from that. So it has to do some things on there. So sometimes it needs some help. So I have this draw on file option that when you click on that, it opens it up in this new window and you can help it out. And so there we go. I think it doesn't. I don't know if you can see that. That's funny. It doesn't like it on this screen because I'm sharing. I had it over on my other one. Sorry, so I can't show that right there. Let me see if I can open it up on my other screen and drag it in, and it'll like that. Sorry. And essentially what that does is gives you a way that you could choose to help it out. So you can't see, sorry. On my other screen, I did my this thing, and instead of clicking Automagically, I clicked the Draw on File button. And what it does is it pops open another tab, another window with kind of like an app where I get to select it. So I'll drag it over and see if you can see that. There we go. So for some reason, when I'm presenting this screen, I think it's a Chrome thing on my Mac, it doesn't show what it looks like. So I did the same exact thing. You can pop up and you can see this is PDF. It's like a normal kind of PDF thing. But sometimes you're like, no, this is the question I want. You can just select it and say like, hey, this is the stuff that I want you to understand, and then tell it to create questions from that. And so currently all it does is it'll find out whatever that text is. And so you can kind of help it out and to create that text. Oh, I just realized I'm not showing in this window. Let's see. It doesn't like it when it's over in that window. So you can play around with that on your own. Sorry, it doesn't look so great there.
Yeah, no worries. So while John is figuring out the tech there, I would like to invite everybody to just try it out. So we learned how to create our forms using the AI Automagically. But then if you could just try it out on your own to see if you can figure out the draw on file. Is there any difference? What do you feel like you're going to be using more? Let us know in the chat.
Also, some of the things I'll say is that rectangle just finds all the text in there, so it doesn't do multiple choice options. So that's the one thing that it does that get there. I know we're kind of running close on time, so I wanted to kind of show maybe two things. It should, I see Efren's thing on permissions. It will ask you permission on every PDF the first time so that you could grant it permission in your Google Drive to access that file. Because I don't have, the add-on does not have the ability to open up everything in your Google Drive for security reasons. So it can only run on files that you've specifically told it to run on and given it permission to. But then it remembers that permission. So you only have to give it the first time. Similarly over here, even in like Google Docs, if I'm in a Google Doc here and I wanted to run it, if I did it the first time, it would ask me permission to access this Google Doc as well, even though you're like, yeah, of course, I'm in the Google Doc. The first time you have to give it permission. So that's, again, a security thing. So it can't just run rampant throughout all of your Google file and get all your information. But the same thing runs in a Google Doc the same. Like here are these questions. It identifies, are these the questions? And then creates the form. Sometimes it gets confused about the last question. So sometimes it can't understand the last question. Like this one, it only found 2 questions instead of 3. So that's kind of a weird thing. It only thought there was 2 instead of 3. And again, it's still like, I think about it as a student, like, just not getting to the end there, or not understanding what the end of that was. So we can work in Google, it even works in Google Slides. You can open up and it'll find all the questions in the slides on any of the slides as well. But I did want to show to tease kind of 2 different things. One of them is what is coming. And then I think there's been a couple of different people who, like Jen said, what if one question split into 2 on Google Forms? Or things where it doesn't work super great on is if it's in 2 columns, it gets confused if there's 2 columns. It does well on things that have 1 column. So some of the things that you'll be able to do is you'll be able to drag things up and be able to identify different components. And my pop-up isn't going to show here. So that is not good. So pretty soon, once this update goes live, when you do that pop-up, there'll be more than just a rectangle button. So you'll be able to tell it like, this I want to get the text out of, this I want to go through just this part. You can help it like search just a specific part. So maybe you could just take like this for left column and find the questions, or then the right column and find the questions. Or sometimes if you like, I just want to take this picture and put that in the form, it'll do that. So I can drag it over and see. When the update comes out, you'll have some more buttons. So you'll be able to say like, here, just find this text. But for this one, I want you to go through and kind of automatically find any questions, multiple choice through there. And then maybe just like snip this out as a picture and put that into the Google form. And then click create questions, which it won't work here. But that's a way that you can kind of help out on that file. Like, no, just look at this part, or like if it doesn't understand the underlying part. It's kind of a little bit like a quick copy and paste. where you can help it out. It won't be able to find it because this is on one that you're not seeing, but yeah.
That's
you
amazing,
won't.
John. and how soon? I feel like I'm going to ask on behalf of Janice, how soon will the rollout be coming?
Yeah, it's super close. Like there's a couple different nuances. I will say like in that, I'll tease it up here in that this is my new one that I was testing on the other version. You'll see all the different things, the buttons that I'm testing. Oh, is that the not? Oh, it's because I'm in Google Docs. The things that are coming. So one, like that one is almost pretty good. But there's a couple other ones like some, so this is what it found. It knew that this was the text part. It thought this was like the magical part and this was the picture. So it took that picture and to put it in. So it has to just do some of those, but it also will be able to make Microsoft form, and so some of those nuances I'm trying to sort out better. It also has like some math things and doing some other things with Google Forms better. So I have to make sure that some of those things aren't working. So I might just have to release that part where you can choose those better first, and then instead of waiting. So that's like a week, 2 weeks until it's like the final things are done there.
Yeah, Sean took that question right out of my mouth. Like as a science teacher, you know, obviously there's a lot of superscript, subscript, and like, you know, scientific notation.
Yes. I know that as a chemistry or math teacher, you probably spent a lot of time thinking about that. I can honestly say I think that I probably spent the most time in the world thinking about how to put math questions into Google Forms best. And so unfortunately, the best way currently is still with a picture, because that when you're typing in a Google form, you can't even really use superscripts, since there's not like rich text stuff in there. So it does not integrate LaTeX or even math type yet for those questions because of Google form restrictions. So if Google form let me put in other things, it would be easier. But that's why like the picture part is helpful, where it even like that math thing, it's saying like, is this thing math? And if so, what should you do with it? And so it has a bunch of stuff in there. It's just not, it's bottlenecked by Google Forms and not by if it is identifying math questions. So I see Janice saying, will we email when the update's live? Yes, we'll do that for sure. And so I really feel bad about like pushing through, but I just want to show like one other thing about Google Chat, because I want to show you all Google Chat. I think this is my email. It only shows chat, but it's not. I have another one called Automagical Templates. Since it's up here, I'll show you that. That Automagical Templates is that it's a Gmail add-on, and it has templates. So like here, when I can choose to reply by, when I get the same email, I can say like, hey, I want to reply with this template, and it can mail merge and knows kind of those types of things in there. But the chat part is where I want to talk about. So you might have rooms down here, and you might have never used the Google Chat part, or maybe you thought you used the same chat, but Google Chat's gone through like 6 iterations where it's still a Google Chat, but it's a entirely different product. And so some of the things that's super cool about Google Chat is these things called bots. And so like I have a bot that I use for a variety of things through licensing, or but you can do these slash commands. So I have one where I'm like, if I wanted to access Google Classroom without going to Google Classroom, I can just hit classroom list, and it essentially tells my bot like, hey, go to Google Classroom and bring up all my classroom lists. And it's like, okay, this is my class that I have. Do you want to open it up in Google Classroom, or do you want to see, sorry, my camera's blocking, or do you want to see your students? And so you could be like, yeah, list the students that I want in that class. And so I can list my students there. So this is just one student, but you can have a list of students. So maybe you want to pull some things or do some reporting from your Gmail. Maybe you had a parent who was like, hey, how is so-and-so doing? Instead of going into Google things. So in your details, then you can pull in all of those things. Like, what do I know about student? How are they doing? I want to craft something. Here are the 5 assignments that I have. And I can see that on this assignment, they did 89 out of 100 because I graded that. And then from here, you could kind of go pop out to that assignment in your Google Classroom. So essentially, it's like this bot that can bring smart information back into my Google Chat. So I don't have to like go through to all of those and do that. So I can do that straight from my Google Gmail chat bot. And so the chat apps, I think they're apps as opposed to a bot, because it can be smart and I can interact with it. So that I think is something that I am spending a lot of time developing in. And I think through the next year, that's going to be really powerful for things that you can go to do that with. Let's see. I see that. So that was kind of the thing. Look for chat bots and chat, where I think this is going to be a really powerful thing to be able to use. And you can find different bots by adding them to your rooms and add people in bots. And for there's you can do a variety of different things, especially if you're using different workflows. So I think that is something that maybe if I wasn't developing, I wouldn't have thought about using, but as I use it almost every day as my like AI assistant. Say like, hey chat, go get this information for me and bring it back to my Gmail. And then I can do stuff with it in my Gmail to send emails. So there is I thought I just saw someone ask about pricing. So yes, in your Automagical, you might have run out of pages, because I do have like it's free to try it out. And then once you build a form, you can only use like 6 pages on a PDF, mainly because I have to pay for the AI thing to run it. So I can't just let everybody run it, because then I just end up paying server costs for that. As I try the best, my wife was a teacher before we had our baby, and well, who's now, my daughter's not a baby anymore, and I was a teacher. So I understand like how much money I had to spend on my own products, and I hate that, but that's why I have that part in there. And I have some blog posts that you can read on my blog about like how I feel bad about. I'm not a great business person. Like I should charge a lot more and I should be ruthless, but I do the best I can. And so as Michelle said, I read her quote there. Yeah, you can just do your Gmail and sign up with a different one, or you can just email me and be like, hey, I need some more pages. And I can add more pages to your account. And so that's kind of the best that I could do on that. So you could tell me like, hey, and then the other part I have is like, if you buy a license and your board buys one, I can refund you. But that's kind of the best that I could do on that in terms of like the payment process. And so like the pricing there is, it's now, I should do a Canadian version. I have it in US dollars though, for the pricing on the apps for Automagical Forms. And then you can see the pricing. It's like $70 a year, or you could do it for a month. It's $15 a month, and then on that monthly plan. So so it's a little bit lower buy-in, and I should sort that out to Canadian dollars as well. But the domain is much easier if you can get your board to pay for it. It's super cheap, $700 for a board. And that's a lot of money, but I know from a board standpoint, if there's thousands of teachers using it, it's much better than buying the individual part. And Google helps me defer some of the cost on that. That's why the pricing is the way that it is there. So I wish it could be free for all, but I can't. There are other things I build that are for free, like the other apps. The slides translator is a really big one you should use for free, where you select a box and you can translate it without translating the existing one. And there's some voice typing in there of any language, so you can read a slide in any language and also do voice typing in any language, and that's free as well, because I think that's a super huge thing. So yes, Slides Pro is great, but not super. I don't spend a lot of time on that. But those are my other add-ons: Automagical Forms, Automagical Templates, the Gmail one. Form Creator it's old. It's as old as GMAT, so it's like 7 years old. Same with Form Recycler.
John,
yeah, time's up.
I know, like, I think we should know better and set this for like 5 hours. I think we could totally sit for 5 hours and just get inside your brain. It's so incredibly cool just to see everything you're doing. And yeah, thank you so much for just walking through Automagical Forms for us. It's one of those things, as soon as you try it, it's super intuitive. So although John showed a bunch of different things, just jump in there, click on a doc or a PDF, press that Automagical button, and like, voila, magic happens. John, now you did say they could email you.
Yeah.
And your email address
is John, John, at automagicalapps.com. So you can .com.
Automagicalapps.com.
You can also sometimes the app will tell you to email support. There are no other people, so if you get email Automagical Apps, there's support, and the other ones, it all comes to me anyways. So you don't have to worry about who is it going to go to. But yeah.
Right, which is phenomenal. And it's also so cool, John, just to see the behind the scenes of all of these add-ons and things that we're using. And we assume there's like this big company behind it all, but it's you, 100% you, and you've taken the time to hang out here with us. And that's pretty Automagical. So I appreciate it so much, John.
Yes, thanks. I appreciate that.